How do you think the Pope and Billy Graham and people like that, when they're staying around by themselves doing a sound check before the shows, how do you think, oh, I just wondering what they do. There was a Kyroot that was just read that I know we can't resist saying something because we had never used it, even while threats loomed over your neural horizons. It was the one that pointed out that how all, we're talking the secondary world, of course, but all monopolies seem obnoxious. Was that strong enough for you? All the way from, if you noticed, if you need to be taken up to speed, notice how, in a sense, I don't mean you have to go around doing it, but how there is, would almost appear to be a kind of inherent dislike for monopolies, such as people badmouth Con Edison, the phone company, in a way, may I suggest, that is singular. And they will even try to explain it. I'm not the first one to point that out, but they would explain it, I'm sure, in such a way if you caught somebody and they'd say, well, what makes me mad? It's the phone company mistreats you, or the power company. The thing is, once they got a monopoly, you can't say, well, look, I'm going to take my business elsewhere. Or at least the phone company in times past you couldn't. And so they could express that that's why they dislike monopolies. Being the sharp-eyed, intellectual Davy Crockett's I know all of you are, consider it a bit further. I was going to say that the real dislike, the sense of an extreme kind of obnoxiousness about monopolies is really something else, as always. There is a deeper, quite physical basis for this. And I would suggest to you in our kind of terminology that what it is monopolies, what they represent out here in the world, the physical parts. But what they're representing is the possibility of things getting too close to abridging the necessity for at least binary, polar-based energy to run this life. As Descartes and J.B. would say, think about it. And now I start this, I can't hardly resist saying something about the Kyroot. The way the Kyroot went, if you've already forgotten it, was that all monopolies seem obnoxious. And thus it is that men must pretend that they like God. There was some more, but that's really the heart of it. Think about it. Assuming that you're good enough by now to get away from ideas of anthropomorphic great beings painted on black velvet somewhere. But of some kind of force, because there is a God, he is. Forget Con Edison or Pacific Power and Gas or whatever it is. You know, the ultimate monopoly would be God. And there is, as I've already suggested from at least two different directions between Kyroots and myself over the last 20 minutes, there is a kind of quite intrinsic dislike for monopolies. So what would be? Where should be the greatest sensation of a dislike? It should be the feeling toward the old idea of a God, a single monopoly. I would also point out, by the way, now that we've stepped into this quagmire, also notice, after all these great stories, such as you had men sing down somewhere, do I have to redo the one I did about Shakespeare? No. I assume everybody caught that last time. That the idea and theory that here would be a man of great intellectual wherewithal and psychological understanding, and perhaps with clean underwear and a good typewriter, can sit there and go, all right, I got blank paper, got a blank mind, got my own theater, and do anything I want to. I'm going to write the perfect love story. And then it's like demons take over his fingers and make him write not the perfect love story, but things go along pretty well until, you know, the fateful end, as one of you pointed out to me, that, you know, poor Romeo comes back to his senses and looks around and thinks, bitch killed herself and knew I was coming over tonight. And Shakespeare thinks, what am I? Some kind of mad dog sexist? I would write crap like this? What made me do that? I wanted to write the perfect. All right, let's go past that. How about these great men sitting around throughout the ages, all over the world, not just limited to the Anglo-Saxon forefathers of some of you, but all around the world you had these men sitting there known as prophets, enlightened ones, those temporarily out of work. No. Those called by the gods. Now they should make the kind of freewheeling, open-ended possibilities that my fictitious use of Shakespeare represented. How about these guys sitting around? They don't have to put up with Shakespeare's ties to even quasi-apparent real world, such as actual physical lovers. These prophets, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and other isms. You would think, now they're sitting around. Again, I'll assume that you're past the point that you don't worry about the gods speaking. Well, all right, I'll still fly. Either the gods are going to speak to them, or they're just there and go, well, all right, I think there's a niche over here in the marketplace for a new religion. So I'll write this thing. I'm going to tell them that the God spoke to me. And hell, if I'm going to do that, I can say anything I want to. Because, well, all these people know. You don't even have to stick to what would appear to be as much, quote, reality as Romeo and Juliet. You know, it's kind of questionable as that story is. But they would think, well, if I'm going to write about the gods, I'm going to sit down here and I got people there. I'm just sure that there's a market. There's a niche out here, and my entrepreneurial spirit is overtaking me. And so I'm going to write up new words from a new god, and boy, I'll make myself a few bucks. Probably get, laid in the process, get popular. So the guy sits there at his typewriter. Abraham, Amos, Muhammad, all of them. You think, well, now they're going to sit down. They're not even stuck with reality. They can do everything they want to. And what happens? What I was getting at, in case you think you lost your place, is even the stories that come out of the gods that I was suggesting to you that the real energetic basis behind that would be the ultimate monopoly. Notice this, though, on top of all that, that even these guys having just, all right, open-ended, the gods are going to speak to me, take your choice, slash, or I can make up anything I want to and tell everybody that. They end up doing what? Not detailing an ultimate monopoly. It's like something takes over their fingers and they all end up doing this. What? I'll tell you. They write about the gods. They start out, our God, the God of our people, the God here of our part of the world, was the greatest God. He was really the only God. The rest of them were just fakes. But he showed up, and boy, it makes us proud to be a whatever you are, an Armenian, an Italian. We got a real God here. We got a God, the power. We got a God that doesn't take any crap off anybody. It's the God. And what's the very next thing they do? And he started having trouble with this minor God. He had trouble with this anti-God. He had trouble with these demons. They set up what would have been, you follow? That's the same thing as the perfect love story, which the evil spirits, the dumb spirits, took over Shakespeare's fingers and made him write a non-perfect relationship, which is the only kind of relationship there is. They try to describe the greatest God, and they'll spend God knows what. Figure of speech. Pages of setting up, the first chapter of their book, or the intro, about how great our God is. The God over here, the Azerbaijan God, the Nigerian God. I hate to say it, the Argentinian God, which scares me to think about that. Well, I don't want to. But they spend this great preface to their holy book setting up this God. Powerful, intelligent, vain, can dance like a champ, do everything. I mean, the God that's got it all going, and they can't resist. They have talked about the God to such a point that you think, well, I'm going to change. I'm going to change what I am. I'm going to become an Argentine. I'm going to become. And suddenly, after building all that up, it's like something takes over their fingers. The ultimate omnipotence. And they'll go, comma, and they set up the anti-omnipotence. All this is an intro. Jesus, holy. Anyway, consider. Now, of course, your forefathers and everybody thought, well, you know, the story, I say they thought, the story was that there was a God and then he had trouble. Like the Christian version and the Judaic version more or less is that, you know, God had this, you know, some minion that wanted to take over. And they got in a fight, which is an old story. And so now man has become somewhat of the battleground between the forces of good and the forces of evil. The forces of kosher and the forces of, you know, eating chili dogs. So that seems to be it. But notice, if you've been listening for the last few minutes, can you see that there's something else involved? I suggest, wink wink, that they set up the story. They can't help it. It's my little joke about Shakespeare. Sitting there with a blank mind, and it's me, of course I'm being silly, and that demons take over his fingers to where he doesn't write what he intended to write. They set up and describe in great detail their God. That is the ultimate monopoly. And then it's as though life makes everybody back up just enough, because monopolies strike humans as the ultimate, a kind of singular, obnoxious creation, or obnoxious possibility. And so what do they do? Not that they got any choice, but it's again, you're dealing with polar-based energy in a three-dimensional world, and so they set up what would be the, may I go ahead and suggest, the ultimate obnoxiousness. That is, the ultimate monopoly, God. And by the time they set it up, and you read whatever it takes, 2 or 3 paragraphs or 2 or 3 pages there in the intro about all those great omnis, whatever they are, omnipresent, you know, omnipotent, omni-rich, omni-vain, you know, omni-everything. Like the beginning, the end, the alpha, the omega, the all-powerful, the all-knowing. But then this guy started getting in trouble, this other guy. And you think, what happened? I mean, if he was God, how'd he let, you know, Lucifer in the Christian version, how'd he have this angel? How'd he have some assistant? He made the assistant. And how come he was so dumb after you give me 2 pages about he knew everything, he knew exactly what was going on, and he made all these things. He made this, all of his assistants. He created his own kingdom. Didn't want to be alone. And he made this guy Lucifer. And Lucifer turns out to be a smartass and tries to take over. What kind of great power is that? But notice what it is. It is a kind of unavoidable easing off of the ultimate obnoxiousness. That yes, here it is. The God. Forget all those other gods. Here we are. We're Argentines, and we got the real God. And here he is, and you describe. You know, got a good mustache, nice black hair, not thinning at all. Man's trim, got nice clothes. And you describe this God, and you think, yeah, I'll switch, you know, religions, I'll switch races, that's what I'll be. And without fail, by God, you turn the page, and it says, but. And then it turns out that there was some other God, some anti-God from over in Chile, or somebody hanging around down around Patagonia, kept coming up there and getting in trouble, and you think, well, there it was. And so then, of course, it turns into all kinds of myths and theologies, but I'm simply showing you it's a way out. So that man is not confronted with the ultimate monopoly, which of course he couldn't. I assume you see that. There's not anything wrong with any religion, but notice all religions have an anti-God. That is, they have an anti-monopoly. That all religions do not just have AT&T. Nowadays, thanks to Judge Green and the powers of the three-dimensional world, not only is there AT&T in your local version, wherever you are, there's also MCI. If, which it couldn't have been done, but if there had been a religion that just stated, we got the God. Here it is, we got the God, all the way from Greek mythology up to the latest religion, up to Islam, of all the majors. If there had been one of those religions that just simply brought out a God, described him, and everything I've already done, not making fun of it, but described him, that he was the ultimate power, he knew everything, he made everything, and that's it, period. Then you can go and tell stories of what you want to. If that was it, would that go? Think about it a second. If there was no other thing. After that, you could have things like, well, he wants you to, you know, eat good and call your mother, you know, stay clean, be nice to each other, whatever you want to add. But the thing is, they set up the monopoly, and if they did not give you a way out, if they did not set up this great monopoly, the ultimate God, but yet point out that there he was in all of his glory, and suddenly he turned around, and there was Sprint. Suddenly there is MCI trying to take away his customers. Then you've got something. Then it would be described as it is physically, literally, figuratively, metaphorically, as the great struggle between good and evil and all that. But I'm pointing out something else to you, that there is a basis behind all of this. A quite physical basis, and it is to let people escape. Well, they got to. I'm not saying it's something that was planned. There is no other choice but to get you away from, to free you from being confronted with the possibility of literally faced with a monopoly. It can't be done, but you understand they had no choice. You cannot present God as being actually omnipotent, because that would be a monopoly. And if that was a monopoly, you're talking about, and earlier when I started this, I was being sort of loose with it, that it is getting far too close to almost abridging the necessity for at least the appearance of binary energy. In other words, the human mind could not take in any form, whether it was called God or Buddha or great cosmic force or X. It could not take a truly monopolistic power and say, this is it. The mind couldn't do it because it cannot be. The mind has got to hear, all right, we got a monopoly. We got the God. All right, got it. But there's this other guy getting in trouble. You knew it before they ever said it. You knew it before a priest or a rabbi ever told you the story of your mama and daddy. As soon as they said, oh, God loves you. God's in charge. He's looking after us. He'll take care of you. All you got to do is be a good little Italian or a good little Catholic or whatever. And you go, yeah, yeah, yeah. And they said, but there's something you got to watch out for. Does anybody remember thinking, what? You just, wait a minute, you're lying. You just said everything was great and he was going to take care of it. What do you? No. Everybody knew what was coming next. Not physically. That is, not verbally, not psychologically. That didn't matter. But the nervous system, being part of the same kind of systems that drive the universe and keep galaxies hanging together, make the buses stop at the right orbits. Nobody's surprised. Even little nippers, big nippers. As soon as they say, here's the ultimate power, the God, blah, 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 you go, yeah. He loves you. He'll look after you. All you got to do is stick with your family, stick with our culture, stick with our religion, stick with our God, and everything is just hunky-dory. But look, nobody ever says, wait a minute, what do you mean, but look? I know what's coming. Wait a minute. Everybody knew what's coming next. They're going to say, yes, it is the ultimate omnipotent power, except he's not quite ultimate and omnipotent. Of course, you can't stop and deal with that. That's the kind of cheap shots that amount to nothing, but life has those guys pop up in life that's all throughout history. The thing in history of man's been taking shots at religion, saying, ha, 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 the same sorts that they've even used some of the words, I'm sure, that I've used in the last 10 minutes, trying to attack religion and say, well, you people say that God, your God, whatever religion it is, Christianity and Judaism, the great ones, Islam, you say that this guy is in charge. There's some figure somewhere, this force is in charge of everything and knows everything. Yes, that's true. Well, then how the hell do you turn around and say he's got problems and that you got to help him out and you got to pray and you got to contribute money to some mosque or what the hell does he need you for? Or how did he end up having some kind of Satan's or anti-gods? There's always some little smart-ass somebody around in life doing that. But notice, does that bring down the churches? No, it's not supposed to, because they're not right. They're not wrong. But to accuse the churches of being, in a self-referring manner, to be absolutely self-defeating in their own theories, their own ideas, which we're talking, of course, about the secondary world. We're not talking about something going on at a primary level. To accuse them of being, wait a minute, this is beyond, may I say, accusing religion, this is beyond mere irrationality. You're dragging us to the lower depths of, should I say it, irony. Surprise, surprise. That doesn't even qualify as a cheap shot. Just useless. It could not be any other way. You cannot have a monopoly. Have we best our own record? Do we now have the world's longest intro again? It wasn't even an intro. It was just a comment on a Kyroot. All right. Let's go back to considering where this was supposed to have started, more or less, of how General Life and a neural revolutionist hearing there might be able to both look after their own interest without unnecessary, conflicting, overlapping difficulties. I would just go ahead and assume, rather than spend another 20 minutes bringing you up to speed again, that some of you were here or saw the tape and are both, and remember some of the last few nights. So I'm just going to see if you could expand some of what we were already talking about. Could you consider how it might be a neural revolutionist? There would only be a neural revolutionist that might be a possible participant, that might be a possible instigator of a non-win-lose game in a 3D reality. Now, in every other ordinary circumstance, on the left or the right side of the aisle, whatever the interest seems to be, we're going to have those who are for the resolution, those who are against the resolution, and those who appear to be, if you even notice them, irrelevantly uninterested. In other words, as we were using as one example, it'd only be a kind of neural revolution, somebody thinking in a radically new way that could, after they heard about the proposed resolution of watch control, could run out and get themselves a watch if they wanted to, without having any interest after that, before that, during that, any interest over the final outcome of the resolution as to whether the world out there apparently, or the world out there did, put some restraints on the private ownership of timepieces. So he would have no interest in what appears to be the outcome of life's interest. For whatever reason, that life has an interest, it is now considering watch control. The neural radical somewhere has an interest that has some similarity, as if there was a choice, that he hears about it and he decides, I'm going to get myself a watch. But he's got no interest in the outcome of the resolution. He has no interest in the outcome of life's interest in the affair, because life's interest in the affair is something different than this one individual owning a watch or not. You surely understand that. You don't have to understand, you don't even have to, there's no real accomplishment to try and figure out what life might be up to with that. If there is suddenly a widespread discussion over the possibility of establishing legislation to control the private ownership of watches, you got to be just a routine idiot to sit around and wring your hands or write letters to the editor about how silly this is. Silly is just a word. Fudge is just a word. Yeah. Life has some interest in this. If you're going to let it be your interest, then I got nothing else to say to you, which may or may not be a boon to your further development. But whatever it is about watch control is life's interest. Life's interest, whatever it is. A person here and there rushing out to get a watch and not giving one whit, one tinkers down as to the outcome of life's interest, is a different matter. That would be wherein there could be an individual and life pursuing their own interest without becoming entangled. We're looking at it from, of course, the individual's view, without becoming unnecessarily, unprofitably entangled in the conflicts where their two interests seem to overlap, parallel, run together, get real close. But concerning what appears to be, I assume you all know what they're calling win-lose games nowadays, which is simply, I have to point out to you, is another verbal manifestation of polarized energy running a three-dimensional world. But to use the kind of descriptions, which I was going to draw in some more examples of a win-lose game, from a radical view would be to see impersonally, without any doubt, that the primary world is inescapably based on a win-lose game. I mean, it's eat or be at. The primary world is win-lose. There is no middle ground. Not over some long period of time. You cannot be half physically protected. You cannot be semi-nourished. Now, you can go on for a little while, you understand. But you have got to get proper nourishment. You have got to get adequate protection from the elements. You have got to, collectively speaking, you have got to get sufficient sex with other healthy mates to keep producing a healthy race of people. It is win-lose. It is simply, if you're back living at a primary level, you get up and you either win today or you die today. You eat, you stay protected, or you do not. So there's no question about that. And I throw in impersonally. This takes no great ability to see that, even using my kind of description, what might be a new use of the term. But there's no difficulty in seeing that. But the trick is, I'm trying to drag you into, the trick is, first, that you've got to see this impersonally. Which I guess some of you might have an intelligence to say, well, that's no problem. That's a serious problem. That is part of the nature. That is part of the sounds that civilization has been making now for 7,000 or 8,000 years. People still wringing their hands over the fact that it's eat or be at. They even accuse. They try to drag it into the secondary world, which we'll get to in a second, but they do it without thinking of the horrendous dog-eat-dog level at which we have lowered ourselves now that we're real civilized and rich and living longer. That's right, sir. Don't think about that. All right, I won't. It is just the rat race. How can we, now that we are living in these urban environments, and now that we have leisure time, how can we use this free time to destroy the planet, to kill each other, to ingest drugs that are very expensive nowadays, and mess up our own little brains? The point is, there are people, figuratively, if you're missing it, there are people still cursing Darwin. You catch it figuratively. There's people still cursing the fact, which is why I say there is a trick to this. It is not native for people to even face up to the fact, which they can. The ordinary intellect can face the fact that, hey, the basis of life is competition. The basis of life is you got to do better than your competitor. You've got to eat. You've got to be the diner, or you're going to be somebody's dinner, literally and figuratively. And people go, all right, that's true. Well, don't make a face, sir. All right, it's true. I see what you're doing. See, you're balling up your little fist in your pocket. I saw that. In other words, the human nervous system cannot face up that it's eat or be at the primary level, which they will go ahead and say, well, theoretically, well, they might even say, well, pragmatically, literally, you're correct, it's true. And they'll still do that, you understand, that they still don't like it. And if you say, well, why? They would then, most people, up until today, would then start trying to drag in some theological argument, probably. That, well, that's true, and that's all right for the beast out there that must kill each other, and for the tigers to eat the poor little dewy-eyed deers. I mean, that's bad enough, but I can understand that. But what I can understand is the bank trying to foreclose my house and eat me. That's not right. That's not right. A neo-radical would understand that not only is that since I already said it, I'll say right. It is inescapable. It is the proper basis. It is the unavoidable basis of the primary world. It would take a neuro revolutionist to understand that it is absolutely, strictly, from that kind of description, a win-lose game at the primary level. But it would also be, even more so, it would require a radically new neural view to understand further that man's secondary world is likewise based. And after that, if an ordinary intellect was falling out of this, after that, the ordinary intellect was saying, oh, forget it. That's not true. It is true. It does not appear to be true, and it could not be presented in this way as being correct, because if it could be presented this way as being correct, which it can't, but if it could, and ordinary people could hear it, which they couldn't, even if I could do it, what it would do is put everything into gridlock. It would freeze up the human nervous system. In other words, people would quit thinking. They'd go, well, Jesus, what's the use? Which would be sort of true, but thank God none of this can happen. But you cannot tell the ordinary intellect, hey, do you understand that the beast of the fields operate on a win-lose game? And you can get them to go, all right, I understand that. And let's bypass us saying, well, that's still the basis of human life. Let's bypass that and not get them upset, all right? Okay. And if you say, all right, I heard a guy say that the actual basis, the actual energy, but the actual nature and basis of man's intellectual world is the same as that. Their intellect, whoever you're talking to, would go, no. Are you sure that's what he's... Oh, the man's an idiot. If that were true, there would be no human progress. There'd be no technology. We would not get anywhere. If you're saying that the human mind is continually limited to a win-lose game, there could be no progress. We could not make faltering steps in one direction. We could not have an Edison working for years, and people before him trying to get an iridescent bulb, something that would run and illuminate without burning fossil fuels of some kind. That would actually be enclosed, and he tried, whatever the story is, 2,000 and something different elements. He would have never kept going. There's a kind of subtle grandeur to the human intellect. The human intellect is not so crude as a lion that looks around and it sees, it has a choice. It looks around, there's a deer over there, and there is a Dodge station wagon. And the lion thinks, let's see, which one would I prefer to have for din-din? This ordinary intellect, responding to me, to this, would say, all right, that is crude. Silly, but crude, and yeah, you're right. But the human intellect is not that crude. It is not so limited. Well, how do you know that? Because I'm thinking it. You know, it's always got you. Because if you say, wait a minute, you're saying that what I just said is not true. Oh, there's no doubt it's not true. I just said it's not possible. Oh, it's possible. All right, how do you know? And the intellect always says, because I'm thinking it right this second. You understand? It's always got you at that level. If you said, the thing holding, are you interested in being more intelligent? You ask ordinary intelligence, it says yes. And you say, all right, the thing holding you back is your inability to be able to think and at the same time picture numbers. If the human mind could do that, there would be no stopping us. It's just not possible. And this intellect says, yes, it is. I said it's not. Have you ever heard the idea before? And it says, no. I said, well, I'm the one that thought about it. I've been studying this. I have worked on this, and I'm telling you that's what it is, and it's not possible. And the ordinary intellect just smirks. And it says it is. And you say, how do you know? And it says, because I'm doing it right now. It would only be, put it to you another way if it got too weird. Of course, I guess this is weirder. It's only you that knows what you're doing. All right, in Ecuador, it would be, if you don't know what you're doing, nobody else knows what you're doing. All All right, if you want to drop into Colombia, assuming that they've got the place cleaned up a little, if you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're doing. It would only be somebody thinking in a different way that impersonally. Is that a universal rule that when you get the last few minutes of whatever you're doing, you can get more dramatic and make more gestures and talk louder and faster? Of course, you're a monopoly. You don't have to put up with this crap. It would only be somebody thinking in a radically new way that could impersonally, to start with, impersonally, no private interest in the matter, but impersonally realize that the basic, the primary nature, as we've been calling it, of the man's primary world is no different. Everybody knows this for a split second, but it is no different than the win-lose games of the beast of the field. All right. Impersonally. Got nothing to do with religion, got nothing to do with culture, got nothing to do with charity, got nothing to do with goodness. Unless you're ordinary, and it's got everything to do with it. But it'd be only somebody thinking radically new way that can see that impersonally, know it at all times, and also impersonally know that flowering, growing from this crude primary world, man's secondary world, the world of the intellect, the city world, that it too is based on the same, limited to the same win-lose game. There, no ordinary intellect will proceed. Rightfully so. They'll say that's not true. And the reason that they know it's not true is they can think otherwise right then. That the mind is not limited to saying, all right, it's either this or that. That's not true. How do you know that's not true? Because right now, I know it's not true. I'm thinking it's not true. There's nothing you can do with it. There's one further step. It would only be somebody thinking, an intellect operating in a radically new way, that would understand that. Assuming you got past the first two parts and you could remember it. There would only be a neurorevolutionist that could clearly see, remember, and accept, impersonally realize that the win-lose game in the secondary world even, assuming you got that far, that game is not man-made. Because even if you drug ordinary intelligence this far, in some way, it would then be blaming man for it. That's part of the nature, it would say, of being civilized. That if it's true, I'm speaking for ordinary intelligence, respond to this, if it said, well, if it be true that what you said, that some people, maybe large numbers of people, that if the secondary world of man, to some degree, is being driven, and it's still based on the absolute, quote, win-lose game, then something is wrong. Something is wrong with the people. They're not civilized enough. Humanity has not progressed far enough. But it'd only be a real revolutionist to understand, wait a minute, it's all correct. This is a valid description. Until I said it, of course, and then it becomes duck flop. But it would only be a revolution that understand that this is true, but if you're going to point the finger somewhere, you're making a mistake. Because it is not a man-made game. Is it a man-made game that polar bears eat Eskimos? That lions eat deer? No, that's not man-made, no. Or is it a man-made game? Is it a man-made situation that one group of people with a political attitude, an economic agenda, a religious persuasion that they want to overtake and consume, defeat this other group? Yes, that is man-made. They didn't have to do that. And you can say, how do you know that? Because I can think it could be otherwise. This group over here that believes in one God or one religion or one economic system, they don't have to walk across the border and try and beat these other people in the head and make them convert to their religion. That is not the same as a lion looking over and thinking, well, I believe I'll eat that deer. That is not the same thing, says ordinary intelligence. The former is a man-made game. Only a real revolutionist understands it's no more a man-made game than it is for a lion to eat a deer.